The Last of Us has dropped 7 years ago, and personally I don't believe it's exactly necessary to tell you how good of a game it really was. The debut game of the series went on to win several major Game of the Year awards, totaling up to 200 of both minor and major Game of the Year awards. The narrative and the acting were also exceptional, which made the game one of the greatest games of all time. The game defined the greatness of the PlayStation exclusive games and sold over 20 million copies to date. Now that we all have gotten a taste of The Last of Us Part 2, we shall compare what improvements have been made and how the story continues. In this video, I'll be comparing game elements like the gameplay, graphics, plot, story, and sound design to showcase how good the latest game really is.
I surely lose myself. Everything I have found here, found by myself. Trying sometimes you.
What are you scared of?
To make this.
The Last of Us made its debut back in 2013 on the previous generations of consoles. The game was a big hit, then due to the different reasons. But what actually made the game so good was its uncomparable and immersive narrative of the story. Let us face it, no other game managed to deliver such a great story that touched the players on a whole new level at the time. Neil Druckmann really showed how good of a director he is in The Last of Us. I won't go through the whole story, but will quickly recap it. So yes, I will be going over to the spoiler category. The story starts with the mutant outbreak, where the protagonist Joel is introduced, and soon after his daughter is shot and left to die in his arms. The story fast forwards to the future where the unaffected population is quarantined. Joel and Ellie meet. Ellie reveals how she was infected 3 weeks earlier and how she's immune to the infection and how she can become the cure to the chaos going on. They go through a whole adventure before being captured by the Firefly Patrol to be taken to the hospital to do the surgery on Ellie to make the cure. Joel knows that Ellie is going to die if they do the surgery on her, and he has grown into loving Ellie as his own daughter. Joel decides to kill his way in and out of the hospital to save Ellie, and story ends with Ellie being left with survivor's guilt. Anyway, how the story is written and how well Joel's feelings and conscience are brought to the players is just out of this world. The game feels as good as the Christopher Nolan movie. The first game itself ends at a high note, but there's more left in the story. But yet may argue in saying that this does not need a continuation and perhaps should have been left at that. Naughty Dog brings back Joel's and Ellie's story after 7 years in 2020. The development of the Part 2 began in 2014, right after the first game, and the development lasted for about 6 long years before it was finally released. Now the latest game has 94 Metacritic score, with almost all scores by the game's reviewers being perfect. But the user ratings and the scores say a whole lot of story. The game was heavily criticized, really heavily criticized on the web for its dark plot, and players were really mad at the Naughty Dog for what they have done with the story. Now I won't be getting into this topic at all, as I have already made my statements or even reasoning regarding the issue in my review video, and the video that I've explained of the endings of the game too. However, I will say this. The Last of Us Part 2 narrative is 200% an improvement and comes with a roller coaster of emotions for the players. Also, if you have followed and paid attention closely, you might have noticed that the official statement made by the Naughty Dog themselves in the early development stages. They openly said that Part 2 would be the opposite of the Part 1, as the game focuses on the feeling of hate more than love, as in the Part 1. I also recall them admitting that the game is going to be very different from its prequel, and that fans of the first game aren't going to like the second game. So, I really recommend you have an open mind when stepping into the game and advise you not to cling on to the first game as much when you're trying out the Part 2. So back to the spoilers. Part 2 flows in a very unique way where the players are presented with the flashbacks of memories. The game starts with Joel wiping his guitar, sharing his guilty story where he chose Ellie over the world. The story then transitions into him gifting her the guitar, reminding her that he promised to teach her how to play. This was actually a reference from the first game, and it's pretty amazing to see actual small references like this throughout the story. The game then transitions into Ellie's perspective and new characters. Another main character introduced at this point is Dina, who plays a great role in the stories as the Ellie's girlfriend. Things take a turn for the worst as Abby, another main character, or rather an antagonist, kills Joel in front of the Ellie with a golf club. Hence the story to avenge the death of Joel. Ellie goes on hunting for Abby, and of course she gets to know that Dina is pregnant, and that the truth about what happened at the Firefly Hospital. It is then revealed the motivation that led Abby to kill Joel, as she is the daughter of the surgeon Joel killed while trying to save Ellie. After several deaths of some characters, Ellie along with Dina gets to fight Abby, and Abby spares their lives learning that Dina was pregnant. Then Ellie and Dina are shown residing in a farm after some time, and Ellie suffers from the PTSD due to the Joel's death. Ellie, being unable to leave her past behind, tries to confront Abby. Dina tries to stop this, but Ellie decides to go anyway, and finally gets to fight Abby. Even though Ellie seemed to be dominating in the final battle, she decides to leave Abby alone, understanding that killing her would bring nothing. The plot ends with Ellie going back to the farm to find out that Dina and the baby have long gone, directing the future of the story to its uncertainty. The flow of the story of the part 2 is significantly creative and better in every way. The use of the flashbacks to unravel Abby's story and Ellie's story at the same time is just ahead of its time, and helps the players to understand the true feelings and the emotions the writers needed to convey. Comparing the two games, Part 2's story is way darker and cinematic than the first one. This way of the storytelling is just perfect in my opinion, as it adds more value to the game. However, the story itself is doubtable, as the writers and the directors have taken really big decisions on killing off characters like Joel and introducing new ones. Also, something I noticed that the majority of the players hated Abby, as she was buffed more than the average. To me personally, she's okay. Women can be buffed, but the voice actress the devs went with is a bit odd and does not really match her physical appearance. Go ahead and see my full review of the game and to know of my honest opinion too.
What is wrong with you?
You should see your face right now.
Both of the games fall under action, adventure, survival, horror game category and is played from the third-person perspective. The first game allows you to control Joel in the majority of its gameplay and Ellie in some parts. The gameplay and the mechanics features a stealth combat mode, both ranged and melee weapons, and other amazing minor gameplay mechanics. As the game was set in a post-apocalyptic environment, the weapon choices were limited. Ranged weapons including rifles, shotguns, and bows, while melees included pipes and baseball bats. The players could also use throwable objects like bricks and bottles to distract, stun, or even attack enemies. A listen mode was also brought to life where players can use to locate enemies. The players could also use objects around the game to use as cover by crouching behind them. Another great feature was the assistance players get with the Ellie as a sidekick. She helps out in combat by providing information on the enemy's locations and etc. The first game didn't really feature anything really crazy, as we were talking about the game from the 2013, but the part 2 took things to a whole new level. Naughty Dog went to the extra mile to polish up almost every action and the interaction in the game. It's just insane. Now the gameplay is so satisfying and perfect in every possible way. Naughty Dog really did make use of the 6 years they spent on this game. The gameplay is similar to the first game, but better in every single aspect of it. And as we know that The Last of Us Part 2 also brings two main playable characters, Ellie and Abby. The story of the game is run parallelly with the flashbacks to Abby's past, showing that she had gone through and stuff. This was an interesting choice as Abby is the main antagonist in the game, and getting to play as her explore her past is a bold and very controversial move from the Naughty Dog. The game features a more gruesome combat system with the dismembering and with other finer details. Just like in the first game, Part 2 also features a stealth system with more mechanics. Players can hide inside bushes and go to prone for better hiding. The prone ability also allows the players to use it creatively in their own way to hide under the objects, reach difficult spots, and other doable stuff. The weapons include the traditional rifles, pistols, and bows, but they are also upgradable. You can use silencers on the pistols for a better stealth experience now. The Listen mode also returns in this game and can be used for the plenty of the combat combinations and styles that the game offers. One more thing Naughty Dog heavily marketed about this game was the advanced AI system. Enemies now call out for their friends. However, this feature in particularly is a bit sloppy, but it's still a cool feature to have. Along with the introduction of the guard dogs, the more interactive and the intelligent AI brings more life into the game. The game also introduces a skill tree where players can utilize their experience points on the survival, crafting, and stealth mechanics. Out of all, what's most eye-catching is the attention that is given to the games and the details. The game is polished in almost every way and the animations seems lifelike. This helps the game become more cinematic too. For example, the looting system in the games is superior to anything else ever came before. When Ellie loots for bullets or weapons, you can actually see her grabbing them from where they are dropped or placed. To put this through the better perspective, even the most detailed games like The Witcher 3 hit the character's hands when looting something or grabbing something. This was basically it was more work for the devs to make it look good. However, The Last of Us Part 2 actually shows what Ellie is doing, and that's just amazing how far Naughty Dog went to make the game look good and polished. It is up to date the best looking and the feeling game on the market right now, with the cinematic effects and the attention to the detail throughout the gameplay. Let's see if Cyberpunk 2077 will manage to dethrone that.
Talking away. I don't know.
If somehow the Lord gave me a second chance at that moment.
The Last of Us was a PlayStation 3 game, and particularly wasn't as famous for its graphics as I mentioned earlier in the videos. This doesn't necessarily mean that the game looked bad, but the game was released near the end of the previous generation of PlayStation. The game was later remastered for the current gen consoles, and it really brought out more of the game, even leading re-nominations for the awards and actually winning some. It is mid-2020 and we are on the verge of a new generation of gaming and graphics. Naughty Dog still decides to release the game on the current gen itself. They did this the same way with the first game as well. Nevertheless, The Last of Us Part 2 just looks insane considering it is a PlayStation 4 game and is optimized to the max. The post-apocalyptic vibe of the game is depicted perfectly with greener environments and a lot of the abandoned buildings. Also, the winter looks really amazing and realistic in Part 2 than the first game. The vegetation, mud, dirt and other textures are denser, crisper and more detailed, which helps for the overall look of the game. The character design also improved significantly, more facial expressions, animations, details and complexities, which help to bring out more of a cinematic experience to the game. Even with all these crazy details and enhancements, the game still runs smoothly and manages to deliver next-gen-like graphics on the current gen itself. It is also confirmed that the game will run on the PlayStation 5 without any issues as well on its release, but what we should be excited about is if Naughty Dog decides to remaster or perhaps optimize to the next-gen graphics with the ray tracing. Considering that the game was released at the end of the PlayStation 4 era, it is obvious that the remaster or an optimization is likely to come to the PlayStation 5 as well, just like what they did with The Last of Us Remastered. It's just going to look phenomenal without a doubt. Now, coming to the sound design, it is no secret that the music is what brought out the best of the story in the first game. Just like the first game, Part 2 also uses brilliant sound design to deliver the most amazing gaming experience one could have. Apart from the use of the melodies and songs to bring out the emotions really well, another great thing about the game's sound design was the use of the guitar. The guitar scenes in particular connects with the players in a spiritual kind of a way, and I can't really explain how good, sad and touching these scenes really feel. It brings out the best memories Ellie and ourselves had with Joel. It's just simply amazing. Props to Gustavo Santaolalla and the other composers and the designers for doing an excellent job in the sound department.
But they ain't.
So comparing and considering all of these improvements, it is clearly visible that The Last of Us Part 2 is the better game in every way. Not so mentioned for the story and the choices that the Neil Druckmann had made. But the overall gameplay experience is 200% better than the previous game. Despite all the critical feedback and all the review bombings, The Last of Us Part 2 is a commercial success as it was able to sell 4 million copies during its first 3 days, making a history as the fastest-selling PlayStation 4 game. The game is also worthy and will definitely be a top contender for the Game of the Year award, and no other 2020 game has been able to deliver a better game experience than it. Let me know what you think about my reasoning and what do you really think about this game as well. Lastly, please consider supporting me on Patreon. For just $1 you can see these big videos much earlier. That also includes extra rewards in the tiers that you choose. Ravenstar, thank you so much for the continued support with the highest pledge of $6.60 per month. Thank you so much for watching, like and subscribe, and I will see you all later.